Good evening. This is Damian Carlson from the vBrownBag. My guest tonight is Jeramiah Dooley. The vBrownBag is a show that is by the IT community for the IT community. Your regular hosts are Chris, Shala, Roger, and myself, Damian Carlson. They were unable to make it tonight, so you just got to deal with me, I guess. If you like the content, like and subscribe. You can follow us on LinkedIn, on YouTube. I believe we're setting up a Blue Sky account like all the cool kids are doing. We are still available on the place formerly known as Twitter. The show for tonight is going to be a little bit open and free flowing, I think. Jeremiah and I did kind of talk about some topics, but I guess I don't want to spoil the surprise about the topics. I can leave that up to Jeremiah. So Jeremiah, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name's Jeramiah Dooley, and this is not my first rodeo with the vBrownBag, so it's pretty exciting to be back after a while. I run one of the advocacy teams at GitHub, and my team focuses primarily on enterprise developers. So people who we've got kind of the open source developer and an independent developer side of the advocacy team, and then we've got we work for companies, and we work on platforms that are built on and driven by GitHub from a DevOps standpoint. And so we spend lots of time talking to customers, and we spend lots of times in executive briefings. And just here recently, we got to go out to San Francisco and have a good time at GitHub Universe. So it's a good time to have a conversation about kind of the state of GitHub and where things are. And kind of I guess I've been at GitHub now maybe 8 months. It feels like it's been about 8 days, but I think it's actually been about 8 months at this point. So it's been a wonderful transition from my previous employer, and has given me some very interesting new things to do from a what is my day-to-day job standpoint that has actually been really interesting and really fulfilling. So we can probably talk a little bit about that too. But like you said, like as much open conversation as we want to have, I'm here for it.
Yeah, the kind of theme of the show here is for Jeremiah and I to chat about GitHub Universe 2024, and also kind of get some of his insight about making the jump from being an individual contributor to a people manager, right? Like there's a lot of different roles and responsibilities. Like it's a completely different way of working, and so we want to kind of get into that a little bit as well. So I'm actually going to take this kind of title card down so it can just be the two of us.
I'd also like to point out, vBrownBag already has an account on Blue Sky.
Yes, we do.
Pretty forward thinking of you there.
Yes, thank you. I'm sure Chris did it because it wasn't me. I actually still have like the blank kind of avatar person on Blue Sky because I snagged my 6-foot dad handle.
We'll get you drawn in. We'll get you on board.
Yeah. I just kind of claimed my handle and then let it ride for, I don't know how long it's been. But yeah, there, I'm going to put this in the chat. There is the link to vBrownBag on Blue Sky. So yeah, there we have it. So speaking of GitHub Universe, I guess just kind of an interesting point for me. That was the first conference I've been to in San Francisco that wasn't at the Moscone.
And here is thanking whoever we need to thank for small favors.
Yes. Yeah. So it was at Fort Mason, which is right next to Presidio National Park. And so it's like right, next to the wharf. Right. And so there was great sunrises in the morning. There was just really beautiful views. The weather was amazing. I saw a man in a Speedo and like one of those like rubber swimming caps swimming in the water. And I was just like, holy crap, that is cold.
one of the people on my team. So there's an actual swim club that is right at the end of Fisherman's Wharf, like just on the other side of the hill that you go over to get from Fisherman's Wharf to Fort Mason. There's a full swim club where they will swim kind of in the little inlet there, but then also will go out into the bay and swim. And to be clear, they're all insane. Like this is not something that I feel like normal people do. but one of the ladies on my team who is also a triathlete was like, I can't be in San Francisco and not go swimming in the bay. And I tried to explain to her, you can,
It's possible.
just
Yeah.
choose not to. But yeah, it's there are some definite hardcore people who are out there every morning in what has to be incredibly cold water doing things that men weren't designed to do. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
I feel like the city in the Bay was put there. Like there's a prison out there that was
Yes.
specifically put there because it was impossible to swim across
Right.
those waters, and
Yes.
there are
People
people who
do it.
do it every morning.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of the water, my wife and I took my kids to kind of a California vacation. I believe it was a year or two ago, and they really, really wanted to swim in the Pacific. And we were down in Santa Cruz, and I was telling them like it's really freaking cold. So I
Yes.
actually got a dry suit for one of my older boys, and the other two just did it old school. And you know, I only like waded out into the surf a bit. After a while, you get used to it, I guess. But yeah,
Until you
I can
get
only
out, and
imagine.
then you're not used to it.
Yes,
And
yes,
listen, for some people, that's just what they like to do. Like I mean, I know people who've gone wandering into the Mediterranean in February, right? There's just people who are like, I must swim in this body of water. And I respect them. I think they're
yes.
crazy, but you do you.
Yep,
That's
yep, absolutely.
do it once and then never have to do it again. That's fine by me.
Yes, yes. So just as a quick reminder, if anybody is out there live and they've got questions, you can ask on the platform that you're watching us on. I'm keeping an eye on the place formerly known as Twitter, and I'm the person posting as vBrownBag here in the chat. So just feel free to throw a question at us. So Jeremiah, how is your GitHub universe?
Unbelievably busy. So this was my first GitHub Universe as an employee,
Hmm.
and uh, just logistically, like not even from an here, I'm an employee and here's what we did kind of standpoint because it's the vBrownBag and we're not going to do that. It was incredibly logistically impressive. Uh, we did in 2 days, we did 142 customer briefings,
Wow.
and like that's a stunning amount of all the things happening at the same time in different rooms. And if you've ever done an executive briefing with a customer, you have 3 to 5 speakers to coordinate. You've got however many people the customer is bringing. You've probably got somebody from PR who wants to be in the room to make sure that people aren't saying crazy things.
Right.
And then you've got to do that 142 times in 2 days at a conference.
Yes.
So it was an impressive feat by my team and all of the rest of the teams who were participating in those, especially when you consider, in addition to that, we also did press briefings. We also did analyst briefings, which were, for whatever reason, the analysts who covered GitHub are just super fun. Like I really enjoyed the analyst briefings more so than some of the other ones that I've done. So for me, it was good to see everybody in real life.
Hmm.
But it was an extraordinarily busy couple days, and most of us got there the Wednesday of the week before because we've got demos to build and we've got badges. The programmable badges were absolutely one of the coolest things. We had
Yeah.
a
Yeah. I
bunch.
actually have one here. Let's see.
Yeah.
So
So let me tell you about these real quick. So we've
yeah.
done these for the last couple of years here, and these are run by the advocacy team. And these are little computers on a badge. They've got a screen on the front of them. On the back of them, they've got a power connection for a battery. They've got a USB-C plug so that you can plug it into your computer. And what we did at the conference was we set up a hack your badge station,
Hmm.
and people could go over, and we had people coming up with building their own little versions of Pac-Man to play on it. We had all sorts of people customizing it and putting pictures and stuff on it. We gave away battery packs, and I think the battery packs were done within 2 hours of the first day, and we brought like 400 of them or something absurd. And
Hmm.
we 3D printed, actually we're 3D printing in the booth the backs for for the battery packs. So that was one of those ones where we've done it for 2 years now, and it's kind of started to take off to the point where I'm pretty confident we're going to do it at every universe. But being able to take home a little computer that you can turn into your badge and then go do whatever you want to with is pretty cool. We gave a whole bunch of them. One of the charities that we were talking with was a bunch of school kids who are building some amazingly cool stuff, and I think we took 100 of them that were left over and sent them out just so kids could hack around on them and figure out what they could do with them. And they've got an external display that you can build into them. Like they're actually really, really fun. And that was probably one of the more freewheeling parts of the conference, with people coming up with crazy ideas. And there is a repo out there under the GitHub Universe org that is just all of the code that people came up with to be able to hack those badges, and then pushed it up into the repo. So pretty fun, kind of nerdy. Not something that you see at every conference that you go to, and ends up being something that everybody open sources it, everybody pushes their code up, everybody builds on what the person before them has done. So it was kind of both in deed and in spirit pretty well aligned with what GitHub was trying to do at the conference.
Yeah, I loved it. So I don't know if y'all could actually see this or if my camera was focusing or not. I've got my screen up here in my prompter, and I don't have a very big screen to look at. But this is an e-ink screen, right? So when you don't have a battery on it, when when there's no power, the screen stays the same way. And so I actually changed mine. I went to GitHub Universe 2024. I was there on behalf of Jeremiah. Thank you. And I went there to look for a job because I'm in the market for a job. And
you were there on behalf of influencers everywhere because you're awesome. I just started the process for you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I actually met a lot of really fantastic people that I'm excited to say are beginning to get scheduled on the vBrownBag. So we're going to have a lot more folks from the developer advocacy teams at GitHub to come on and talk about GitHub Actions or Home Assistant, whatever their favorite nerd hobby is or their day job thing. So yes. So I actually changed my badge to say level up your team. I had made it say like will work for money. But I think I had asked Claude.
Really great. Which was really great.
Yes. I'd asked Claude the AI, like, is that too weird? And Claude said it was a bit too cheeky. And I was like, all right, that's fair. That's fine. But yeah, I really, really liked it. Once you hook it up to USB-C, you can use VS Code or Thonny and just write MicroPython, push it to the device, and you're off and running. It is super cool. I've never had a Raspberry Pi on like a metal circuit board as a conference swag thing before. It's my favorite conference thing ever.
Yeah. And the fun, like the nerd part behind the scenes was, so every one of those has to be programmed. So if you flip over to your actual badge, there's a QR code on it. And that's the QR code that normally would be for like a vendor to be able to scan your badge or something like that. And so what we did was we built out a series of workstations at every place that they were going to be doing badging. So we did a day 0, which was for all community and partners. That was which was over at the Intercontinental on the other side of town. But you were able to go get your badge there. You were able to get your badge at some of the hotels. You were able to get your badge at Fort Mason. We set up little Raspberry Pi stations with a QR scanner so that every time someone came up and got their badge printed, they could also hook the badge up, the Badger badge up to USB-C through the Raspberry Pi, scan the QR code, and then have it program your badge with the defaults. So program your badge with your name and your title and the company that you were there with and all of that stuff in there. So it is a very nerdy thing, but also had to be distilled down to its absolute most simple way of interacting, because the contractors who are there doing the badge scanning, no one is going into a command line and trying to troubleshoot why this isn't working, right? So we had to make it as foolproof and repeatable as we possibly could with lots of, oh, that one's not working, just swap it out for a new one and keep going type of instructions. But no impact to the lines, no impact to how quickly people got registered. It ended up working out really well, and everybody slept extremely well that weekend after we all left San Francisco.
Yeah, it was a very cool experience for me. You know, you and I have known each other for maybe 15 years now, Jeremiah. I think
Yeah.
we've been close gaming buddies for the past 10 years. Um, and you know, just as a matter of fact, I've been to like
Yes, we've been to a
30
lot of those.
conferences maybe, right? Like, and that's not really a lot of conferences to have gone to in the past, 10, 15 years. 30 is just kind of an estimate I'm making. Probably 20 of those were VM worlds, or here and in Spain, et cetera, right? So um yeah, I had gotten really cynical about conferences, right? Like, if you go to more than a couple in a year, they all look the same,
Yes.
right? It's like, oh, great, we are back at the Mandalay, or we are back at the whatever the other one is, the Sands, right? Like, yay, like here we are, or we're at the Moscone, uh, and everything feels the same. And then, I didn't go to conferences like so many other people due to COVID, and then post our COVID lockdown in America, just the way that travel happened with companies and conferences, et cetera. Um, you know, it actually took a while for kind of conferences to come back, and for companies to remember how to actually do a conference.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I hadn't been to a conference in probably 4 years, right? Not in person. I'd done the virtual things, which are not the same. And I, I was away long enough that I was really, really happy to be back again. It was like, wow, here we are. Here's the
Yeah.
show floor. Here's the keynotes, right? Like, I really, really enjoyed the experience and the overall. How would you describe the overall kind of atmosphere of the attendees, Jeremiah?
I think not just the attendees of the conference, but I think the GitHub customer base, the GitHub audience in general is pretty eclectic, because the heart of GitHub will always be open source. And so there's a huge number of attendees of the conference who are actual honest to goodness developers, like people who write code every day. And this is the tool, this is the platform that they use to do that. And they
Right.
want to know what's new and what works. But it's also a whole bunch of very large companies who have products that require code to be written, who want to give their employees the best platform that they can to be able to do that at scale with the controls and with the security that they need. So it's even more so than something like a VM world, or even a reInvent. I would say that this has the most interesting people standing side by side. I mean, it is literally the the hardest of hardcore open source developers standing next to the CTO of a Fortune 50 company, both of them like watching the same demo and saying "Holy shit" at the
Yeah.
same time, right? Like
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it was and it's a balancing act, and it's something that we spend a lot of time working on, making sure that like both of those audiences are welcome, both of those audiences are important, both of those audiences are very valid and appreciated in the context of developing things and getting stuff done. And so making sure that there's something there that captures everyone's imagination and that makes them want to go find somebody who has a GitHub hoodie on and say, hey, I need you to tell me more about this, because I'm not exactly sure what I just saw, but it might be the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like it was really important for us to be able to do that. And so it was actually one of the first, might be the first GitHub Universe where there was actually a section of the keynote that was talking specifically to enterprise developers,
Mhm.
right? Not instead of talking to open source developers, but in addition to talking to open source developers. And I think that that gave it a very cool vibe. Like there were bunches of people who were really excited to be included, and there were a bunch of people who were really excited to not be excluded.
Right.
And, having everybody in the same place at the same time, the venue played into it a lot. One of the few places where there was always somewhere quiet to go talk. There was, the outdoor portions of it were very included and made for a really wonderful kind of in-person experience. So I think for me, it was exciting as an employee and in any number of ways, but also like you, as someone who's done way too many conferences, way too many conferences, and who we tried really hard to make conferences during pandemic not suck, and I don't think we made a whole lot of headway. It
No,
was
it still did, but I don't know if it's possible to make it not suck, right?
It
It's,
was. Oh, I firmly believe we had an opportunity to do something amazing. And the same people who did conferences in person, who don't understand the magic of what they're doing, tried to do it virtually and ruined everything.
yeah.
Like we had an opportunity to do it a different way, and inertia kept us where we were. And so it just sucked for 4 years. And so this was one of reInvent last year, at the end of last year, was not terrible. But this was the first conference that I've been back to since the very beginning of 2020 that actually felt like a fun, like I just enjoyed walking around talking to people. I just enjoyed jumping in and watching demos. Like it wasn't even the GitHub portion of it as much as it was an extraordinarily well conceived and run conference,
Mhm.
finally, in a venue that didn't suck.
Yes, yes, yes. Yeah, yeah. I would absolutely agree. What were some of the announcements that really kind of caught your interest?
There,
And I know
there
that might be a loaded question because you
yeah,
probably knew a few of them before you went into it. So,
yeah, we knew a couple of them. I mean, I always look at it from I talk to GitHub customers all day long and hear what it is that they enjoy and what it is that they wish we would do better. And so the one of the big things that we hear a lot of that people wish we would do better is to give them, listen, if we're going to AI wallpaper the entire planet, which it feels like is the vibe at this point, at least give people the choice to be able to pick the model that they want to use to be able to do that. And for a while, Copilot was ChatGPT and ChatGPT only. And
mhm,
so I think the biggest one that I had people coming up to me and saying thank you about was the fact that Copilot, GitHub Copilot is now multi-model, and you can use Claude, um, you can use Google, you can use ChatGPT. Like there's actually just a drop down in the bottom right that says which of these models do you want to use, and then that's the LLM that's going to get used for any of the interactions that you would do there. So if you're doing something that's more coding specific and you want to use Gemini, because like Gemini has gotten a reputation as something that understands code and coding topics really well, you can do that. If you have something where you're trying to do more natural language querying, you can pick whichever of the Anthropic or OpenAIs makes the most sense for you. If you're developing something that you're going to deploy later and you don't want to have to deploy an entire LLM and you want to use, the ChatGPT o1 Mini or something that would be a little bit more appropriate for deploying as part of an app. Like we wanted to be able to give people the choice to be able to do that without having to do all sorts of backflips and overlay things and rely on an external tool like VS Code to be able to bring some of that other stuff in there. So being able to do that right directly through the GitHub interface was probably the biggest one. It was the one that we kept under the tightest tent before everything came out. Um, the one I think the one that probably got me the most excited. So for everybody who's watching, my background, I am not a developer. Um, I have gotten to be competent, particularly at looking at code and figuring out what it's doing. and kind of working backwards from the code that is in front of me. But I would never stand up and say, like, I'm a developer, no matter how many bash scripts or PowerShell scripts I've written. Like I'm never going to stand up and say that. But
Yes.
what
Same
I
here. Same
what
here.
I what I have are lots of ideas that if I were a developer, I feel like I would love to make headway on. And one of the things that we released as part of GitHub Universe was one of the GitHub Next projects called Spark. And Spark kind of takes that idea of, if we're going to use AI to build everything, why don't we simplify the front end so that people like me who don't have experience in how do I set up and start building an app and start developing or start writing code and developing what it is that my idea in my head says it should be, what if we just gave them a way to be able to do that really easily from a native front end? Like, just open it up and start talking to it and have it actually build an app. And I was very skeptical before, like, when we were told, hey, this is what we're building, because we've seen lots of, no code and low code, and we've seen lots of these, like, we want to make development more accessible to the masses, and usually what it means is like a UI based query tool,
Right.
right? Like we'll put something in the background that's at some data source and then give you the ability to query what you want and then format the way it lays out. But I don't, like, that's not, I have an idea for an app and I want to go build it. And Spark is the closest thing that I've seen to, like, oh shit, I I can actually do that. And so
Yeah.
we got to spend a little bit of time before Universe playing around with it. And there's a couple great demo videos that are up on YouTube that give you kind of a good overview of, like, what it is and what it does. And it is by far the thing that I've played with the most since we left Universe. So I would say that probably those two, like the multi-model on the front end, but then also like legitimately having GitHub release something that talks to the people like me, right? The people who were in enterprise IT for their whole careers, the people who, sold storage arrays and infrastructure stacks and played around with virtualization and scripting and those sorts of things. Uh, this tool is pretty damn cool.
Yeah. My 16-year-old was using the new multi-model with GitHub Copilot. He's a student, so he gets Copilot for free. And so I forget, is there a specific model that you can talk to, like you could your digital helper on your phone? Is that a specific model, or is that just like a
That's
new
it's
functionality?
All of the models will do that.
Okay.
The one that he's probably using would be the default one that's built in, which is ChatGPT.
Okay. So yeah, he was actually he was having it build a game, and he was just kind of telling the model what the game, like what he wanted the game to be. And he was doing this, I think, last night, and he actually had it write a soundtrack, uh, and he was just so blown away by the model putting notes and chords into an array and then using the numpy module to somehow like access them and like make this generated music that didn't suck, like it wasn't just like
Right.
a bunch of random notes that just sounds like white noise, right? But yeah, he was just beside himself with happiness about how cool it was, right? So that is cool. Like,
And it is, and
bottom
that's
line, it's
and
very cool.
it is. And I think, again, like, when you go back to that spirit of, as a as a as a company who makes developer tools, why do we have to be limited on what the definition of developer is?
Hmm.
Right? Like there are if we know anything about the world, it's that there are people who have great ideas or who need things every day. And the vast majority of them are never going to be able to sit down at a computer and build out the code and then deploy the code to be able to see that vision come to life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like being deliberate about not gatekeeping what a developer is and letting people have good ideas and then bring those ideas to whatever kind of life is necessary for that idea. The more we can facilitate that, the more that we can make that be the reality, the more that we can help that be the definition of developer. Like I feel like that's right in our wheelhouse. Like if we're not doing that, we're just, we're just iterating on something that was really popular 10 years ago.
Right.
And like nobody wants to see that out of GitHub, and certainly GitHub doesn't want to see that out of ourselves. So
Yeah.
this is the kind of stuff. And for those of you who haven't been to it, next.github.com is that's the bleeding edge stuff. Like this might be a product someday, but right now it's just a really cool proof of concept. And there are a couple more that we announced at Universe that will probably make their way out there here over the next couple months. But that's the playground. That's the let's throw it against the wall and see what sticks. And that's where Spark is right now. But damn, it's pretty impressive.
I'll have to check it out. It's been super busy for me in my personal life since I got back from Universe, so I haven't even had a chance to do much with it, with the things that I saw and learned about. There was a keynote on day 2 that I really wanted to catch that had the founders of Home Assistant,
Yeah.
which is actually had the opportunity to talk to one of the founders in the booth the day before, and just their vision is so amazing, right? Like open source for everyone, like it's accessible, like here's the STL, go print your own thing, here's the go print your own PCB, right? It's just it's so cool, and seeing them on stage um in a keynote, I thought like just really kind of set an entirely different kind of tone for me, that wasn't just enterprise yada yada yada, like some of
Yeah.
the other enterprise conferences you and I have both been to and even
Well,
spoken at.
and that's the cool part. Like Home Assistant is a really good example, right? Like Home Assistant is open source to its core, right?
Yep.
Home Assistant is, I would go so far as to say belligerently open source by
Yeah.
by design. Like that is how
Yeah.
they want that to run. Um, oh, Home Assistant is also one of the largest GitHub customers on the planet. Like the sheer number of commits, the sheer number of PRs, the sheer number of lines of code that are committed into that repo is mind-boggling. And
Yeah.
that was part of the presentation that they gave on stage. So like at some point, we enforce the definition of what is a developer. We also kind of enforce the definition of what is an enterprise. Like I work with some of the largest open source foundations on the planet who are far, far more enterprise than many of the like Fortune 50 companies that we deal with, right? Um, the idea that you can't be both, or the idea that it is an either or kind of thing, Home Assistant is a great example of how that line gets real blurry real fast, particularly when a project gets large enough.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because, again, they are openly and avowedly open source, and that project has taken off and has an entire ecosystem. Like it is the star that there are lots of things orbiting around.
Yeah.
And yet, when I would talk to analysts or when I would talk to customers, they would ask, "How is Home Assistant doing this?" Right? So, like, it's not how is Microsoft doing this, or how are these Dow Jones listed companies doing it? It's like that open source project with those two guys, how are they doing this? Because we struggle with this, doing this many PRs. How is it that they're managing that? So the Home Assistant demo was really cool. The advocacy team got to be involved in that in a bunch of different ways. Jessica Dean, who works on my team, actually built that whole demo as we went through and kind of built out the dashboard and pulled up all of the repo stats for the Home Assistant project. the demo was super cool, but that's like, in my mind, that's the perfect mix of all of the different types of GitHub customers,
Yeah.
right? Individual developers who just want their obscure, I bought it off of Temu webcam to work with their Home Assistant setup,
Yeah.
to the people who work at Home Assistant who are trying to build a platform that can support and scale to everybody. And then like the fellas who own who run that, like who are very vested in making sure that it's available and that there's uptime, and that the uh, that people aren't able to come in and do bad things, and that the code that does get committed is of high quality and safe and has known sets of dependencies and those sorts of things. So it was a really cool demo on stage, but also I think it's a really cool kind of glimpse into the complexity that is that GitHub user base,
Yeah.
because it is certainly not any of those individually. It is all of them put together, and that was a good example of it.
Yep. So speaking of Jessica Dean, I hope to have her on the show early January of
Excellent.
2025. Uh, I gave her choice of Home Assistant, which she is. To say that she is a fan of Home Assistant is like
Yes.
it's like saying that water is wet. Like
Yes. If Home Assistant offered her a board seat, she would quit me in a heartbeat.
yeah. So yes, yeah. So it's like GitHub Actions or Home Assistant. Take your pick, Jessica. So I actually hope for the Home Assistant.
Okay.
I stood it up here in my own office. It runs my key lights and my LED lights.
Yeah.
I have it connected to my Apple Home. I can use Siri to turn my lights on and off.
Yeah.
And every time I do it, it makes me happy. And that's like every single day.
So after I moved to kind of the manager side of the house, and we can talk about that here in a little bit,
Yeah, yeah.
I did a radical simplification of my life at home. Um, I was one of those people who had racks full of home lab gear. Um, I was one of those people who I had a data center that I used to work for and had a rack of gear in there and was replicating everything back and forth, and
Hmm.
had my own Active Directory and was running my own DNS servers. And
I
uh,
remember the spreadsheet of your home architecture that was also in a colo. Yes,
yes, you actually visited that colo. Like
I did
we
indeed. Yes.
in a different lifetime, we installed stuff in that colo.
Yes.
So I radically simplified, and my deal was, if it's not an off-the-shelf appliance, it's too complicated for my house. So it was move to a firewall appliance. It was
Mhm.
moved to off-the-shelf. Like, I can't do Ubiquiti anymore. Like, there's too many things to have to troubleshoot. Give me something off the shelf. And for the Home Assistant, for the home automation stuff, it's 100% Google, and it
Mhm.
works. And if the power goes off at the house, the power comes back on, everything boots itself up. I don't have to touch anything. It's glorious. And at least 5 times a week, Jessica will ask me, "Can I please come convert your entire house to Home Assistant?" She
Yeah.
wants everything running off of the Synology in a container using Home Assistant. And every time we sit down and I will invoke the Google overlords to turn on lights or whatever, she's like, "I could really come fix that for you." So yeah. And I promise you that she would write code that would be completely automated from a DevOps perspective using GitHub Actions.
Mhm.
So you've essentially made her pick which of her children is prettier by giving her those two choices. So I'm
They can
yeah,
both be.
either
Both the
way,
babies can be pretty. Yes.
right. Either way, yeah, she's pretty amazing. And either of those topics, you're gonna have to make her stop talking about it at some point.
Yes, I'm really excited to have Jessica on. I hope that she survives Ignite and the holidays and
Yep. That's where
arrives
we're
at the V
headed
Brown
next.
Bag in one piece. Yes.
Yeah.
So we've been talking about Universe for a whole minute. Let's see if we can kind of transition a little bit to the other kind of topic that we had here, which was your journey from going from an individual contributor to a people manager. Um, what are your initial thoughts on that?
It was terrifying. Um,
Didn't you make that transition during COVID?
A little
Or
bit
am I
before it. So, well,
okay? Okay.
yeah, I mean that's I made the deliberate decision during COVID. So, my entire career, I was the I was the young guy in the room, right? Like I was the ahead of the curve. I was the I will work 18-hour days. I was the I'll have the pager the whole time. I was the I'll fly wherever you need me to in the world. Like I was the kind of poster child for overachieving individual contributors. Um, and like that shit gets tiring.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
a young man's game. That's I did the startups, had good startup exits, had bad startup exits. The last startup that I was at got bought by NetApp,
Yep.
and after I transitioned over to NetApp, because I had 2 more years to go to vest out the rest of my equity in SolidFire, which I was in no universe going to leave behind me. They offered me the role of running an like a named accounts team. So basically representing all of their next generation technology to the 30 largest companies in the world. And I had two of the former SolidFire folks who came with me, and it was what I call like lead from the front. It was the guy who holds the flag and runs down the field and tells everybody, follow me, just keep up with me. So
Hmm.
it wasn't like full people management, but it was the first time that I had to start being aware of and taking care of the people that reported to me. And I liked it a lot. It was extraordinarily hard, and I liked it. And so when I looked for what role I was going to take um, after I
NetApp.
left NetApp, it had to be something where there was an opportunity for me to learn more and then move into a people management role. So I went to Microsoft and joined the advocacy team at Microsoft and spent the first year just learning, because this was the first developer focused role that I had. So I was going from I mean, SolidFire was reasonably developer focused in that it was a programmatic product. I mean, it was an API driven product,
Hmm.
but not to the level of a cloud provider, right? Not to the
Right.
level of we have customers who use Azure every day kind of level. So I
Hmm.
spent the first year just being an individual contributor and learning as much as I could. And then I was given the opportunity to run a team of people who focus specifically on the Azure VMware product. So it was a little bit of one foot in both worlds, because I spent, you know, 10 years in the VMware side of things and had spent a year deep dipping into the Azure side of things. And so um, got to run that. And that was the first time where I deliberately took a step back and said, this is not about me. This is not about kind of where I'm going or what I want to do. This is about making these people that work for me as effective and efficient and successful as possible. Um, and it was maybe the hardest thing I've ever done in my career.
What what was there any single challenge that stood out to you the most, or was it just literally
Yeah.
everything?
So it's a um, we context switch a lot,
Hmm.
right? Just in our everyday lives. We've got work contexts and home contexts and kid contexts and marriage contexts, and we switch contexts a lot, but those contexts are almost always dependent on the audience. Moving from an individual contributor to a manager forced me to context switch my role in what I was doing. And it's almost like there are two big context switches. The first one is when an individual contributor moves into like a senior or a principal role.
Hmm.
And that context switch is from I, where everything is about me. How am I going to be successful? How am I going to complete this project? What sort of visibility do I have, to we? How are we going to complete this project? How are we going to be successful?
Okay.
The second context switch is way harder because it goes from we to you.
Hmm.
It goes from me playing a part in what we're doing here to me simply facilitating you playing the best part you can. And it's tricky because I would bet for most of the people who are listening right now, the worst manager you ever had was an extraordinarily good individual contributor before he took that role. And what he is struggling with is that context switch.
Yeah.
It is, how do I make this not about me? How do I make it so that I don't immediately run back to the individual contributor work that I'm really good at the first time I am uncomfortable or the first time I am challenged?
Mm-hmm.
How do I stay here and make this about you? And I had a really good teacher at Microsoft, and I had a great team of people that I was working with. I had technology that I was comfortable with. Like, I feel like I had the best possible setup,
Mm-hmm.
and it was still hard as hell to because there were so many times where I just wanted to jump in and just be like, listen, I got this. I see you're struggling with this. I'm going to do it for you. It'll be great. Watch how good I am at this. And having to constantly fight, like, that is not my job. That does not
Yeah.
do anybody any good. Like, that is not going to further anyone's career or confidence or ambitions. And so I had the best possible setup, and it was still incredibly hard. And then at the end of that, I got a job offer from Amazon to go over and run their advocacy team for the ECS Elastic Container product. And it was one of the most challenging jobs I've ever had. And we'll just kind of leave that hanging out there. But was the thing that made me confident that I can actually be a manager, like an actual people manager, not a middle manager, not a token manager, not a run hard and keep up with me manager, but someone who could actually make a group of people better at what they do and more effective at what they do, while getting the things that need to be taken off of their plate away from them. I think my team was 9 people at Amazon, and so many different backgrounds, so many different types of people. The concept of treating people fairly, not equally, was something that Amazon taught me, that team taught me. And so it was a challenge in many ways from a culture standpoint, but I got to manage an amazing team, and I got to
Yeah.
learn how to manage teams much more effectively than I ever had before in my career, to the point now where I would say I am more valuable. I think I am more valuable in making groups of people better by managing them than I would be by joining them. Like, there's only
Interesting.
so much impact I can have when my work product is the thing that I'm giving to a company. If I get the opportunity to help make everybody's work product better, if I get the opportunity to make everybody feel more safe and part of the team, like, the aggregate impact that has on the company is significantly more. And
Yeah.
that's cool. Like,
Yeah.
it's a different type of hard, but I feel like at this point, the hard part is that there's so much of our industry where that's the only way to advance, right?
Is
Where
by stepping on people as you climb up and then
that
pulling the
too,
ladder up behind you.
right, right, right. As This Is America plays in my head. Yes, but
We already talked about this, Dooley. We're not going there.
we did. We did. But what I mean is, there comes a point in your career where there are many, many companies that say you must move into a management role in order to continue to advance,
Yep. Of
right? And
course, for
so
sure.
you inflict people who are not capable of making that context switch onto people who just want to be good at their jobs.
Hmm.
And I think that there's, at least in my experience, there's so much of the conflict that people have, right? Like, that whole idea of people quit managers, not companies. there's so much of the conflict that I've seen that is not because someone was a bad manager, but it was just because they weren't put in a situation to be successful while trying to learn that context switch from we to you.
Mm-hmm.
And some people never can. I mean, some of the people that I respect the most are people who were put into a management role and who worked their asses off at it, and who came to the perspective that said, this is not what fulfills me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I'm more than happy to go back to an individual contributor role because I know how hard that is, and I know that that's not the thing that brings me joy. But Microsoft and GitHub, I respect a lot because the IC track and the manager track are not in serial; they are in parallel. So you can at Microsoft, you can be an individual contributor all the way up to, distinguished engineer level and never have to manage a single person. And
Interesting.
by contrast, you can come in as a manager and you can manage all the way up to managing groups of distinguished engineers. And you don't, there's never a mandate that no matter how good you are as an individual contributor, in order to achieve more individually, you have to move into this thing that, by the way, takes a really good individual contributor away from the company, which
Right.
sucks.
Right.
And if you can't navigate that context switch well, impacts other really good individual contributors at the company. Like, it's a
Mm-hmm.
pretty high risk, low reward transition for people who just want to get another raise.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah. 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 Like if
I'm
they're at the top of their pay band or something. Yes.
right,
Yeah.
right. And the only way that I can get where, above where I am now is to move into a manager role. And now I don't get to be an IC anymore. And I don't know how to relate to other ICs because I've always been competing with them. And now I'm supposed to be advocating on behalf of them. And my
Yeah.
brain hurts and I don't know how to do this. Just let me go build content. Right. So and we're seeing more and more of it. And I would love to hear feedback from the folks who are watching, like, of other companies who are looking at it the same way. Because I think if I was in the market looking for a job, regardless of which side of that IC or manager line I want to sit on, having a company who understands that those are not interchangeable
Right.
and that it can hurt a lot of people really quickly if you put the wrong person in one of those management roles. So I would love to hear about, because we get people asking all the time, who are great companies to work for? Like, who would you recommend talking to for jobs and those sorts of things? And companies who understand the power of a good manager and the power of an IC to continue to be an IC are pretty high on that list for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. Is there I've actually got a couple questions here, and I'm trying to think of the the best one. I guess it, if you're thinking about someone who who might have gone from IC to manager, right? Like how do you manage the relationship change with uh, folks that were formerly your peers at that IC level that now you may even manage them, right? Like what are kind of the strategies or the approach that you take?
I wouldn't. I mean, I recognize that there are people who don't get that option.
Yeah.
Um, but I feel like again, that is an incredibly hard context switch to make in general.
Yeah.
I can imagine that being elevated out of a team to then turn around and manage that team, a large amount of it is going to be just your relationship with people, right?
Hmm.
Like, if you're not an asshole, if you have participated as part of a team and that team respects you and respects one another, then hopefully saying we're going to take somebody who knows what's going on here and have them be your manager isn't met with resistance. It's met with joy. But, like, that's on you. That's on
Yeah.
how you build those relationships. That's on how you have participated as part of that team. I will say, um, it. So I'm an Army brat, and I moved around my whole life. And I think I went to like 7 different schools in 3 different countries or something crazy. And everybody's always like, oh my God, how could you deal with moving around so much? It was wonderful. It was wonderful to learn from what you did and then
Yeah.
kind of reinvent or start over when you got to where you were going. And so if someone asked my opinion, what I would say is get the first one under your belt, like I did with that transition from SolidFire to NetApp, with people
Mhm.
I knew, with people I respected, and with a role where I could kind of, it was kind of a player coach.
Right.
I could learn some of the basics and blocking and tackling and how do I relate to people and what are the politics of managing up, which become much more important instead of just managing down. Like I got to do that in a safe place because NetApp didn't care if we lived or died, and I knew everybody who was on my team, so like, it wasn't a real high pressure environment. Um, but I knew that if I wanted to do that seriously, there was going to be a transition, like there was going to be a job change that needed to
Mm.
happen.
That makes
And
sense.
the job change to Microsoft got me in that door and let me kind of take what I feel like is that next step into a full-time, not player coach manager role.
Mhm.
And then the move to AWS was really put up or shut up. Like it
Right.
was like I had to have a genuine conversation with me and with a bunch of people who are close to me around, am I willing to go all, because there's no going back. Like at this point in my career, I can't go back to being an IC. Like there's just been too much time. The
Yeah.
amount of stuff that I would have to learn to go be, you know, a sales engineer or to go be a product manager or to go be an individual contributor who is worth anything. Like I had to deliberately choose to cross that line. And being able to go to a new place and start from scratch with nobody knows who I am. Nobody knows my management style. Nobody knows the things that
Right.
I'm worried about. Like I could go in and just project the confidence that I wanted to project, was very useful. And not everybody gets that opportunity. And certainly, I would argue in 2024, that's a lot harder to do than it was in 2018 and 2020.
Yep.
Um, like there's just, it's not the same job market, you know,
Right.
all the way around to be able to do that. But I think you can. I think if that's something you even remotely think you want to do, you need to start preparing those relationships now. You need to start defining how you participate with your team and how your team sees you before that becomes available
Yeah.
rather than afterwards. Because the worst case scenario is taking a management job and having people who work for you that also applied for that management job,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yes.
Um,
Yep.
there are 2 people at GitHub who applied for the job that I have now. And so the necessity about being open and transparent and honest and like committing to their welfare as professionals is not optional. Like
Yeah.
coming in and having a chip on your shoulder or having an ego about things, like it just, again, not everybody needs to be treated equally, but you have to be able to treat everyone fairly. And that's a lot easier to do when you're coming in as a blank page rather than coming in as somebody that I've worked with for the last 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there like a specific communication style that you developed that you feel has allowed you to effectively lead and motivate your team? Or do you think it's just simply being fair and open and honest that is the kind of the secret sauce there?
I think it's um, I think it's the recognition of we talked a little bit about it earlier. My job is to both manage up and manage down.
Hmm.
And we've all had managers who are really good at managing their leadership teams, but who are pretty terrible at managing the people.
Yep.
And we've all had managers who are really good at managing their people, but were kind of lost politically. And that
Hmm.
ended up being limiting for everybody on the team. And,
Oh yeah.
you know, particularly in 2024, when when, I woke up one morning at AWS and had 10,000 of my friends fired. Like the not doing both is kind of a limiting factor all the way around. So I would say that the communication style, I mean, being honest and transparent, I feel like those are table stakes,
Mhm.
but making sure that everybody understands that the managing down and the managing up go hand in hand, right? And there are absolutely people on my team who refuse to toot their own horn, refuse to make a big deal out of the work that they're doing. And it's my job to make sure that they know that that's okay. I don't need you to stand on stage and brag about yourself, but I have to
Right.
in the right context in order to help manage up, both for the good of the team and for the good of you.
Right.
And so if you, whatever the communication style is, and it's going to differ, I manage really senior people, right? Like I manage people who've been doing this for a long time. I manage people who are really, really good at their jobs. There are nine developer advocates for the entirety of GitHub for the entirety of the planet. Like these are people I am in awe of from a technical standpoint. My communication style with them is going to be different than when I worked at a data center where everybody who worked for me were kids out of high school and college.
Oh, of course.
Right. So
Yeah.
I think the communication style, regardless of what ends up being appropriate for the group that you're managing, the idea that I only exist to serve you and like your job is to make me look good. My job is to make my boss look good. And we will do that together in a way that makes it apparent the effort that everyone is putting in, and that
Hmm.
will ultimately be good for your compensation. That will be good for your career,
Yeah.
right? Like you
Yeah.
just have to, help me manage up. And in return, I will manage down in a way that is appropriate and effective. And earning that trust, especially in a new role, especially in a role with very, very senior people, uh, like you can't mess it up.
Yeah.
You can't mess it up very much. Like that's a hard one to come back from if you do.
Yeah.
And it helps. Like the manager who helped me the most at Microsoft was Ashley Willis, and
Hmm.
my manager at GitHub is Ashley Willis, and that is not an accident, right? Like you find the people who bring out the best in you as an employee, and that helps you do your best for the people that report up to you.
Yeah.
And so you know, I think early on in our careers, you always ask like, why do the same people seem to be like package deals who move from company to company? Right? Like that seems weird. Why would people do that? And then you get to this part of my career and I'm like, oh, you're never working anywhere without me.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Yes.
this is this works and
Right.
it is effective and we bring out the best in each other and we know how to support and communicate with one another. And we'll do that. We'll do that for GitHub. We'll do that for Amazon. We'll do that for whoever it is that we're with.
Hmm.
Um, but the communication style, the understanding the role, the being transparent about it, the earning trust by doing it and not just saying it. Like those are all, I think that's all part of the gig. But again, you have to commit to it. You can't do it and fly around the world and want to be on stage all the time. Like it just doesn't, you can't compete with the people that you are trying to protect and encourage and
Right.
nurture. Like you just maybe you can. I'll take that back. Maybe you can. I
Maybe it's
can't.
possible.
Maybe
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
possible. Maybe there's somebody out there who has figured it out. Um, I it's funny. I tell the story at GitHub. Like I recognize I'm done in my career. This is as far as I want to go. The only step up for me would be a VP, and I like people more than I like tech. And I don't know that I'm willing to make that next context switch that says it's not about you, it's about the company.
Right.
Right. And so this is as far as I want to go. These are the people that I want to manage. This is the, this is the technology that I want to go out and share cool shit with the world about. And it is amazing how much pressure that takes off of the grind of when's my next promotion, when's my, like, I'm good. I'm good. I got exactly where I wanted to be, right? Like I'm a simple person who likes simple trains, and I'm good where I've gotten to, but it definitely helps. Like it definitely helps because the people who work for me know I'm not trying to step over anybody.
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
I told them on the day I showed up, in a perfect world, this is the last job I ever want to have.
Mhm.
And that helps with that show them and not just tell them mentality. But again, like that feels like something that is very unique to me in my situation. But it is certainly made for a pretty wonderful first 8 months at GitHub with the teams that I get to manage.
That's
Like
awesome.
it's been a crazy time, just in general, the whole world. But uh, but the team that I get to manage and the job I get to do at GitHub is kind of it is the thing I have been looking for. And so I'll be here till Martin throws me out.
Martin is Ashley
Martin Woodward
Willis's
is
boss.
Ashley's boss, right?
Yes.
He's the VP who runs all of education and office of the open source program office and all of the advocacy teams. Yeah, he's my boss's boss, and
Right.
I'll stay as long as he lets me. This is pretty great.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Jeremiah. This has been a really good discussion. We're a little bit over time here. Thanks to everyone who has hung out this long and
Yeah.
has found this conversation valuable. Where can folks reach you, Jeremiah, if they want to reach out?
I have discovered here in the year of our Lord 2024 that I am a social media monogamist, and I can't do the threads and LinkedIn and Twitter. I'm obviously on LinkedIn, but Blue Sky is pretty much the only place that you're going to find me at this point. So if you've jumped over to Blue Sky and want to hit me up, want to talk about any of this, want to talk about GitHub, we can talk about the train that I stole from
Oh, yes.
Azure Marketing at GitHub Universe simply because I needed it. Um, yeah, we can talk about whatever you want, but LinkedIn or Blue Sky is probably going to be the best place to find me.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you very much. Uh, Thank you, Jeremiah. It's
That's
been a
right.
pleasure. I always
As
enjoy
always.
talking to you because I mean I literally talk to you every single day. So,
Yes.
but
And
it's
we
good to
still
see
keep
your
doing it.
face. Right? It's good to see your face. All
Awesome.
right, man. Thank you very much, and thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a great rest of this week, and we are planning to be back next Wednesday with more of the V Brown Bag. Thank you.